you be suing any of these news organizations, and if so, when?
Well, right now we're looking at quite a few politicians, celebrities, athletes. Whoopi Goldberg's on the list. She called me a murderer after I was acquitted by a jury of my peers. She went on to still say that. And there's others. Don't forget about Sank from the Young Turks. He called me a murderer before verdict and continues to call me a murderer.
So recently, Kyle Rittenhouse, the Kenosha kid, the man who defended himself on video in what should have been the least controversial self-defense case in the history of this nation, appeared on Tucker Carlson to announce he was launching something called the Media Accountability Project, aka TMAP.
Well, Tucker, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Me and my team have decided to launch the Media Accountability Project as a tool to help fundraise and hold the media accountable for the lies they said and deal with them in court.
Now, a lot of people are excited about this. A lot of people have mentioned and have commented and have told me that Kyle name-dropped Cenk Uygur as one of these malicious liars against him, and as a person that Kyle Rittenhouse was going to hold accountable for the lies that Cenk has wielded against him and continues to wield against him. But we need to talk about this in a fair, honest, and interesting way. We need to discuss the prospects of Kyle Rittenhouse's legal claims against these people, and we're going to do so, but first, this video is sponsored, so we'll catch you on the other side of that sponsorship. I hate to break it to you guys, but your sheets, they're disgusting. They smell bad, they're basically a magnet for bacteria, and you're sweating in them all the time. Also, your sheets can cause back acne if you're sleeping on them constantly, but it's not 100% your fault. Now, let's be honest, let's be reasonable. I'm not supposed to say this because this is an ad. You're probably possibly a little bit disgusting yourself, but it's also due to the fact that the sheets industry hasn't had a major innovation in decades. This is where My Miracle sheets come in. These sheets are absolutely amazing. They actually come with an antimicrobial silver woven into the fabric in order to deal with some of the problems that we were talking about. And contrary to my brain thinking that that would make these hard because silver's a metal, it actually makes them super soft, or they are super soft even with that. Go to mymiraclesheets.com, get this thing done, fix your problem, and be less disgusting. So after the trial of Kyle, which by the way is what Tucker Carlson's documentary about Kyle Rittenhouse's trial is actually titled, Kyle kinda did a little bit of a media tour. He did a couple of appearances here and there with Charlie Kirk, You Are Here, Steven Crowder, all these different shows he decided to go on, and obviously the big one is Tucker Carlson, and he did the documentary with Tucker Carlson, but for a minute, Kyle seemed to disappear from the scene. Kyle seemed to evaporate out of the ether and return to his normal life. However, it was promised to people who were invested in this case that Kyle was going to seek some form of accountability, or at least it felt like it was promised that Kyle Rittenhouse was going to seek some form of accountability against the media that maliciously smeared him and continues to maliciously smear him to this very day. So people have been waiting with bated breath for Kyle Rittenhouse to start filing them lawsuits, going after the media, becoming rich, and basically bankrupt CNN. A lot of people wanted CNN to be renamed KNN because it would be Kyle Rittenhouse's new news network. But here's the thing, it's been a while, and Kyle has finally announced that he has some form of a plan. He's fundraising for that plan, and now we have to evaluate whether or not Kyle Rittenhouse's plan is even legitimate.
So the idea is, maybe like the Covington Catholic kids, you will be suing news organizations that maliciously lie about people who are in the news? Is that the plan?
Yes, sir. We're going to be holding them accountable, Tucker.
Do you, I guess I have to ask a kind of a dumb question, but why isn't there a group like this that exists already? Since the media so often are not observers, they're players, they're participants in the news. Why hasn't someone done this before?
That's a good question, Tucker, and I'm not sure, to be honest, but I don't want to see anybody else have to deal with what I went through, so I want to hold them accountable for what they did to me, because I don't want to see anybody have to go through what I went through.
Now, let's be 100% honest. The story around Kyle, the mainstream media portrayal of Kyle, the mainstream media portrayal of facts of the case that were caught on video that should be indisputable, is 100% nonsensical, 100% false, and in my mind, 100% malicious. And Kyle named a couple of people, including Cenk Uygur, who were acting quite malicious in the way that they described the events surrounding the Kyle Rittenhouse shootings, where he defended himself against Joseph Rosenbaum, who attacked him, then he defended himself against Anthony Huber, who attacked him, then he defended himself against Gage Grosskreutz, who attacked him with a gun, and it's all on video. That's not in dispute. It's not in dispute on this channel. I've covered it multiple different times. I've gone after people for spreading lies, rumors, misinformation, and disinformation from mainstream media sources to online media sources to random dudes that make videos about Kyle who are spreading the same nonsensical information. And the reason I did this has three components of it. One, I believe in self-defense. I believe in the rights of self-defense, and the mainstream media is ideologically predisposed to oppose self-defense. It is obvious in their coverage of any questionable self-defense story, especially if the races line up in a way that make them happy, and we can see it over and over again, and it continues well beyond Kyle. It existed before Kyle, and it will exist in the media in their hearts and minds that average American citizens shouldn't be able to defend themselves against criminals because average American citizens are inherently evil or bad or whatever, and self-defense as a principle is evil and bad or whatever. The second reason is because it was in fact, in my mind, malicious. The attacks on Kyle Rittenhouse were easily debunkable. The facts of the case were out there as quick as 15 minutes after the instance. We had a really good picture of what was going on. And the media, because they perceived Kyle Rittenhouse as a right-winger, because they were providing cover for the unparalleled political violence that we saw in the Black Lives Matter riots, the unparalleled property destruction, decided to make Kyle the face of the right-wing response to the violence and basically pinned all of the violence that happened during the Black Lives Matter riots on Kyle Rittenhouse. He was the cause of it, even though by their own account, he was a response of it. But it was the idea behind Kyle Rittenhouse, the idea that you can defend your community from people who are burning it down and stealing flat screen TVs for civil rights or whatever. Also tied in with the maliciousness was the maliciousness in combination with the stupidity. The fact that people kept repeatedly saying Kyle Rittenhouse crossed state lines as if that meant anything, or was even accurate, or he was in a state that he didn't live in, or Kyle Rittenhouse was a resident of Illinois, even though he lived 1 mile from the border of Wisconsin, and he was all the way in Kenosha, and he had no reason to be there because it was a different state, and somehow that was significant. That produced a ton of laughs on this channel, and you guys already know I'm going to be playing the Cross State Lines compilation. Roll the compilation.
Who crossed state lines. He drove from Illinois to Kenosha, Wisconsin. Now again, he drove from Illinois to Wisconsin. It's not like he was in his front yard and he was approached by a group of individuals who posed an imminent threat to his life. He drove across state lines in a state that he doesn't even live in, and then he crossed state lines with it. He crossed state lines, meaning he traveled across state lines. He traveled there from out of state, who again traveled across state lines.
Cross state lines.
Across state lines.
And finally, there was an extra added element to the fact that the mainstream media was doing this to a child who by all accounts seems like he was a good kid. Kyle was working a job. He dropped out of school early in order to help support his family. Earlier in the day, Kyle was captured cleaning graffiti before he decided to come and defend the area because he cared deeply about the community. The mainstream media would have you believe that Kyle Rittenhouse went out and cleaned the graffiti earlier in the day so that he can come back with a gun, somehow Jedi mind trick a convicted pedophile into attacking him and going for the gun, just so he can go on a shooting spree, but only against people that he must have mind controlled into attacking him in the first place. So we covered this for all those different reasons, and also all the wrong people, all the bad people were on the wrong side of this issue, so it made it much easier for me to frame the correct arguments against bad coverage. And honestly, we were rooting for Kyle to be found not guilty. It would have been a grave injustice if he were to be convicted, not to mention all the prosecutorial misconduct and issues, not to mention the crazy things that the prosecution believed about Kyle that were outlined in Binger's post-trial interview, which we also covered on this channel. But here's the thing. When you're suing the media, there's a different standard. When you're suing the media, especially in the United States, it's much more difficult. And this is where I run into problems with the idea of TMAP. Now, to be clear, my impression of TMAP, the Media Accountability Project, and by the way, it could be different, it's just my impression from the way it was described by Kyle in the Tucker Carlson interview, is that essentially there's two different issues afoot. There's Kyle Rittenhouse, who's deciding that he is going to file lawsuits against people who maliciously smeared him in the media based on the events surrounding his trial. That's in one category. Then there's the Media Accountability Project, which is an advocacy organization very similar to the organization called Truth Revolt that Ben Shapiro used to do in conjunction with the David Horowitz Freedom Center, where they will be seeking to hold the media accountable on other cases. Now, these are admirable goals. This is something that I'm rooting for Kyle in order to achieve. However, these are two different issues, two different goals, and they have two different obstacles in their way. An advocacy organization that goes after the media for lies and misinformation can function if it's well funded. It can put pressure on people and advocate for people who didn't get a national platform like Kyle Rittenhouse when the media is targeting them. So TMAP as an organization has admirable goals. It seems like it's being run in good faith, and Kyle Rittenhouse is a really good face for this organization based on the malicious smears that happened to him and continue to happen to him. However, this is not the same as Kyle Rittenhouse's individual defamation cases against news outlets. These, unfortunately, for you guys out there, I hate to break it to you because I know you comment on every video I do related to Rittenhouse and people lying about him, about how the lawsuits are coming, these people are all going to be in court, and Kyle's going to own their YouTube channels, own their studios, and own all their stuff. It's really not that simple, especially in the United States of America. And before you cite Nick Sandmann, need I remind you that Nick Sandmann was 16 when he was smeared by the media, so there was actually a lower threshold, lower standards for him to file his lawsuits, and he didn't actually win in a court of law. He won via settlement, which is great for him, but it was something that the networks did in order to not pay the cost of litigation, which they might have lost solely due to the fact that there was a reduced standard. So what I'm trying to say is, for those of you who are unaware, you have to prove 4 different quadrants of defamation in order to win a defamation suit in the United States of America. And when you examine this standard, especially when you're over 18, you understand why it's incredibly difficult. So the first quadrant is the most obvious, and it should be the easiest to prove because people in the mainstream media were saying things that are clearly debunked by video evidence, and that is you are reporting falsehoods about people. Obviously, this was happening. The mainstream media, alternative media, anybody with a left-wing brain was spreading lies about Kyle Rittenhouse during the course of his trial, and a lot of them just believe objectively false things about the case because they're either ignorant or incredibly stupid, or they're being malicious in the way that they're smearing them. The second thing is that you have to also prove that these people knew that it was false. Now, a lot of these news anchors, a lot of these anchor actors, a lot of these online people are really dumb. So a bunch of them actually don't know the facts of the case. So already right here, you're running into problems. On top of that, you have to prove that they were malicious or they lied, they said something they knew was false for malicious purposes in order to hurt somebody, the subject, aka Kyle Rittenhouse. Malice is incredibly difficult to prove. It's one of the things that prevents defamation suits from going forward so many times in the United States. And malice is the thing that Nick Sandmann was not required to prove because Nick Sandmann was age 16 at the time of these smears. He was under 18, so he didn't have to prove malice. He just had to prove the falsehoods, which helped benefit him in terms of negotiating power for the settlements that he ultimately ended up getting. On top of that, your fourth quadrant is that you have to prove damages. Now, undeniably, there is damage to Kyle Rittenhouse. His name has been dragged through the mud. There's all these reports about people trying to get him out of university. People don't want him to have a job. And essentially, his name is tarnished. His family's names are tarnished. I mean, they smeared his mom as somebody who gave him a gun and dropped him off at the protest to go kill people. So she has a good case, even though that's completely not rooted in fact. It never happened in any way, shape, or form. And this is legit. Like, Kyle should be able to prove this just based on the fact that these people have destroyed his life or what was his previous life. But that's the thing. You have to prove not 1, not 2 of 4, not 3 of 4, all 4 of these quadrants in order to win a successful defamation lawsuit. On top of that, there is one other gigantic hurdle that you have to overcome in order to win a defamation lawsuit, and that is what is dubbed by the media as the Alex Jones defense, which in reality could be just as easily called the Rachel Maddow defense, which in reality could just as easily be called the any corporation at any point in time when they're associated with the media defense, which is that these are not news organizations, these are entertainment corporations, and they're talking about Kyle Rittenhouse for entertainment, non-informational purposes. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this defense, but whenever a defamation case or any of these kind of cases meet the threshold to at least be brought to court where they're not going to be dismissed out of hand by a judge, and they go up against these entertainment companies, this is the defense that they always use in order to dodge accountability. Rachel Maddow very famously used this when she accused a news organization of being a literal puppet of the Russian state. And then she goes to court and says, well, when she said that, you have to understand that Rachel Maddow's show is hyperbolic, and on top of that, it's an entertainment show and not meant to be taken seriously in terms of news coverage. By the way, I'm using Rachel Maddow as an example so you can understand it, but in reality, it's not a partisan thing. This is the go-to move. I believe Fox News hosts have used this as a defense. I believe that Alex Jones, in fact, I know for a fact that Alex Jones has used this as a defense, and it's something that only gets called out when it's somebody on the right. But this is the standard industry defense against defamation allegations, and the reason it's so standard is because it actually works. So Kyle Rittenhouse has a huge threshold to overcome in order to win defamation lawsuits. Now, I'm not exactly sure, and I'm sure Kyle has lawyers that are advising him on this, if because the smear started when he was 17, if he can sue based on those smears, based on that window of him being 17, and win some money based on the lower standard, even though now he's 19 years old.
Well, right now we're looking at quite a few politicians, celebrities, athletes. Whoopi Goldberg's on the list. She called me a murderer after I was acquitted by a jury of my peers. She went on to still say that. And there's others. Don't forget about Sank from the Young Turks. He called me a murderer before verdict and continues to call me a murderer.
Interesting. And what about the people who called you groundlessly a white supremacist, which makes it pretty hard to get a job for the rest of your life if you're a white supremacist? Will you be responding to them?
Absolutely. We are going to hold everybody who's lied about me accountable, such as everybody who's lied, called me a white supremacist.
Yeah.
They're all going to be held accountable, and we're going to handle them in a courtroom.
But if that is not the case, the chances of Kyle actually winning monetary compensation and getting anything more than a corporate red statement from an HR board about how they were wrong, or this was my opinion, or this is how I felt, but I understand the facts of the case and I'm acknowledging that, you're not going to see a lot of money flowing in Kyle Rittenhouse's direction from these news organizations. The Nick Sandmann precedent is not as solid of a precedent as you guys think, and those in the media who are reporting it as if it's a defining precedent might be blowing smoke up your you-know-where, or they might be ignorant themselves. Look, I want accountability for Kyle. I would love to say that Kyle Rittenhouse is on his way to a giant paycheck at the expense of our political opponents, the people who lied, the people who smeared him, the people who willfully and maliciously lied and smeared him on purpose in order to promote their political agendas. But unfortunately, or fortunately in certain circumstances, in terms of press freedom in other places where it matters, that's not that easy to do in the United States of America. There are devastating protections for media organizations for speech in the United States, and that's down to the First Amendment. So while it feels terrible now, while it feels bad, while I feel horrible for Kyle, you have to understand that the overall principles, the overall framework of this nation were put in place like this for a reason, and that's basically the reason why Kyle Rittenhouse is unlikely to win money. Now, there's a chance that there's settlements, there's a chance that he has the basics to bring a case forward, and that costs too much for them to actually fight it out, and that would be a good thing, but overall, the media organizations are not above banding together and pushing back on somebody like Kyle Rittenhouse in order to prevent other people from feeling encouraged to sue the media in similar ways. So yeah, don't expect a giant payday from Kyle Rittenhouse. Expect some weak statements of people acknowledging buried in their stories about how they were wrong, like Anna Kasparian's more inaccurate correction statement. But overall, that's what you're going to hear. Also, you're going to hear people preface with, in my opinion, which Cenk Uygur over at the Young Turks already started doing while he was saying he wasn't scared of being sued, even though he's doing that specifically to prevent himself from being sued. Hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you liked the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description box. This has been me talking about the prospects of Kyle Rittenhouse winning lawsuits. Till next time.